Welcome to the MTA Podcast Series, a weekly audio cast featuring interviews with recognized industry professionals. And your host, Ed Carlson.
Tuesday, November 17th, 2009. It is our studied opinion that this has been a bear market rally which could ultimately lead to a move well below the March bottom. In order for the dramatic downside projection to around 400 to be invalidated, the S&P would need to get above 1100 before the end of this year. Today's guest is Peter Eliades, editor and publisher of Stock Market Cycles. Peter has degrees from both Harvard College and the Boston University School of Law. He has performed as a singer and pianist in Manhattan cabarets and off-Broadway musical comedy in both New York and L.A. In 1972, he began his financial career as a stockbroker. In 1975, he began publication of Stock Market Cycles and earned Timer Digest's Timer of the Year award. From January 1985 through August 1990, Stock Market Cycles had the #1 market timing record in the country. In 2001, Peter was awarded the MTA's Charles Dow Award for his paper, Sign of the Bear. He has made frequent guest appearances on FNN, ABC, CNBC, Wall Street Week, Larry King Live, and the Nightly Business Report, and has been featured in Barron's, the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes, among others. Peter, welcome to the MTA Podcast Series.
Well, thank you, Ed. That makes me sound halfway interesting. I got to talk to my PR man or something. I guess, huh?
Well, maybe I should be your new PR man. Peter, this probably won't have a whole lot of interest to too many people, but I've got to come out with this. You know, I was struck by in your resume this time you spent as a singer and pianist. Not just because it seems on the surface to be so far outside of what any of us do, but rather I've found that an unusual number of technical analysts have past lives as artists and musicians. A couple weeks ago, I interviewed Chris Carolyn, who has a degree in painting and printmaking. I've been researching an interview I'm going to do with Robert Prechter in a couple weeks, and it looks like he's had a background in music performance. I myself have some background in music. What do you suppose is the connection between the arts and technical analysis?
Well, it is interesting, Ed. In fact, Prechter was a drummer in a rock band. In fact, he came up for a couple of minutes at my wedding and played drums for us at my wedding as I was singing to my bride. So, and Joe Granville, whom I've been pretty good friends with for quite a long time, for probably the last 20, 25 years. Joe is a ragtime pianist. There are a lot of them, and I think there is some kind of connection. I'm not going to get too esoteric and claim that it's some kind of left brain, right brain thing, although I think there may be something to that. There's a creativity within people that tend to be technical analysts that look for things in a different way, I think, than most people do. And in terms of our market analysis, believing that there is some kind of form and function to the market, and perhaps there's a tie-in somewhere there, but I definitely agree with that. And in fact, those of us in the business have commented on it many times in terms of how many people that have become fairly well known in terms of technical analysis have some kind of artistic bent to them, and a lot of times it's a musician too.
Did these degrees that you have, these high-powered degrees from Harvard and Boston, did you have those before your music career, or did you get those afterwards?
No, those were before. I actually graduated at Harvard College, and then I went to Boston University Law School. I graduated law school. I'm not going to tell you what year because it would make me sound really old.
Okay.
But I moved to New York City immediately upon graduation. And about a month or two later, my mother called and said, "Honey, you passed the bar exam. You can come home and practice now." And I said, "No, not right now, Mom." And that's when I started I had done a lot of performing before that. I was in the Hasty Pudding show at Harvard that's very well known for guys like Jack Lemmon and a whole bunch of show business luminaries that it produced. But I had done a lot of performing on an amateur basis and even some professional throughout high school and college, but I really began my musical career in earnest after I graduated law school and stayed in New York City for 3 or 4 years, worked at just about every club in New York that had a piano bar and a lounge where I played and sang, and then I moved to Los Angeles and pursued the career there for several years too. So it was a long time that I was in that career, and music was always my first love.
So you got degrees from Harvard and Boston, and then you spent several years in music. You must have been very mad at your parents.
Well, no.
Forget it. We'll let that one go.
A couple of quick stories in relation to that, and one of them is that my father was a very conservative and very strict man. From Europe, he was born actually in Smyrna, Turkey, of Greek parents, and came over here, and a couple of years into the last century, a couple of decades into the last century.
Uh-huh.
But he always said to me, he said, because he knew my love for music, and he says, you get your degree first, you get your education first, and then you can become a bum. And I tell people I took him up on it. So
yeah. Well, we all give it. A lot of us had to get that out of our systems. Listen, let's move on to what I know our listeners are going to be more interested in, and that's your studies of cycles. In 1968, you initiated your stock market studies with J.M. Hurst's book, The Profit Magic of Stock Transaction Timing. Personally, I found that book very difficult to read. What made you stick with it, and what did you get from it?
Well, it's interesting you say that, Ed, because I came upon the book at a friend's. It was in California, at San Clemente, in fact, Richard Nixon's old territory.
Oh, yeah.
A friend of mine had a beach home down there, and he invited me down for the weekend, and on his coffee table I saw this book. And that was right around the time that I was really getting quite interested in the market. And I asked him if I could borrow it, and he said, sure. And I took it home, and I looked at, it looked interesting, but after the first few pages, I said, well, this is crazy. Even though, I majored in physical sciences at Harvard, so I was well into math and physics and calculus and the whole thing. But I started reading the book, and I said, this doesn't have anything to do with the market. This is all, math and equations and whatever. And I put the book aside, but I kept thinking about it. And then somehow I said to myself, I kept seeing the book, and I challenged myself, and I said, look, you got a pretty good education. This book shouldn't be over your head. Sit down and read it and let it sink in. And I did. But I understand, I can identify with your saying that you looked at it and say, well, that's about as far as you got was looking at it. There were a couple of things in the book that really struck a chord with me, Ed. The first one was, Hurst said that what happens in the market has absolutely nothing to do with day-to-day events, he said. The media will invent stories after the fact and tell you why the market went up or down, but they really have nothing to do with why the market goes up and down. And that really struck a chord with me, because I had heard so many times the media making up stories or excuses as to why the market went up or down, and often it would be the same reason for the market going up as it was for the market going down. So
sure.
It just didn't make any sense to me. So that struck a chord with me. I challenged myself. I read the book. I found it fascinating, and that got me off on my life of psychoanalysis. In fact, tying the two together, there's a lyric from a Jimmy Webb song called Evie, and the lyric says, sometimes a single moment changes all the ones that follow. I think all of us can identify with that phrase at some point in our lives, or maybe many junctures. But
sure.
When I think my discovery of that Hurst book on this guy's coffee table was something that really completely turned my life around and set me off in a different direction.
Speaking of influences, who was George Lindsay? And can you explain his bottom to top approach to major market tops? And have we already passed the time window for his topping signal this time?
Yeah, absolutely. George Lindsay, perhaps he's been dead, I think, for at least 10, maybe 15 years. But Lindsay was one of those past market masters that all good technicians that want to look into market history should become aware of, along with Edson Gould and a couple of other of the real classic market analysts. George Lindsay was one of the initial cycle analysts in the market, and in fact, he established a reputation for himself. He's one of the few cycle guys that Lou Rukeyser in his old Wall Street Week program used to refer to kind of affectionately, because he gave Rukeyser's program a pretty good shot in the arm when, back in 1982, Lindsay called the bottom of the market around August of 82, and he gave Lou all these good cyclical reasons why the market was coming and reaching an important bottom. The reason I refer to Lindsay a lot is that he had a concept that was somewhat an anathema to me, because I always look for bottom-to-bottom counts, and I also told people that it's a lot easier to find cycles when you count from low to low rather than attempting to find one counting from high to high, because highs tended to always be a little more diffuse than bottoms were. Bottoms tended to be more of a V-shaped bottom rather than the diffuse type of tops that we see that can take sometimes several months to form, with different indexes forming tops at different times. But Lindsay came up with a concept that very often an important market bottom is an equal number of weeks away from a preceding low as that preceding low is from the low before it, or a low before it, I should say. So that's where the bottom to top concept came in. And it bothered me when I first saw it, because I said, well, now you're really complicating things if you're telling me that if I'm looking for bottoms to bottoms and looking for the number of weeks or days or whatever between cycle bottoms, to tell me that sometimes when I count them out, they're going to reach tops rather than bottoms. But the more I started studying the pattern, the more respect I had for it. And you'll find that very seldom will there be a market top where you can't do a bottom to top count. So I would encourage all technicians and all people that do analysis of cycles, and it's a lot easier for us now with computer software, to look for this type of thing. With a computer, what you can do is, if you think for other reasons, for other technical reasons, we're near a bottom, then put some kind of cycle indicator that you may have and just kind of gently slide it left and right and see if you're at a point where you are the same distance away from a preceding low as that low is from one before it, and you'll have your bottom to top count. And Lindsay also said that oftentimes at an important top, there's more than one bottom to top count. In other words, you may have 10 weeks between two lows, and then 10 weeks from the most recent low a market top forms. You may also have a 27-week or a 52-week or something even longer than that. And obviously, the more of those that you can find, the more likely you are at some kind of market top.
Mm-hmm. Well, while you're trying to uncover cycle tops and bottoms, I'm trying to find anything about George Lindsay on Amazon.com. Has he written anything, or has anything been written about him?
Lindsay he did write a book, but the book that he wrote, I don't think was too much related to the market. It had some, I don't know whether it had some kind of political thing to it, a political ring to it or whatever, but no, there was nothing. You're not going to be able to, the kind of research you have to do on Lindsay is going back and either getting some material that he had written, or it's really very difficult. I had some material on him that I forget how I came upon it first time. I think the first time I read about him was by another market newsletter writer, and this is going back probably 20-25 years. But I definitely heard about him when I saw him on that Louis Rukeyser show around the early 1980s, when he predicted that market bottom. And I tried to do more research in terms of locating him and more information about him. And you're right, it's very difficult to do. So a lot of it is just hand-me-down type material that was from technician to technician. There isn't too much. Some people had some of his old newsletters, because he did write a newsletter, but it's very difficult to come upon any kind of material that he wrote.
That's too bad. We're going to continue with Peter Eliades in a moment, but first a reminder that on next week's program we'll have Martin Pring, author of numerous books, including Technical Analysis Explained. Peter, most technicians, when they think of secular bear markets, they certainly recognize that the market goes down in a bear market, or a secular bear market, and that's why it's called a bear. They don't just go down. It's more a matter of they go sideways and up and down for a number of years. What will warn us that we might be in for a new type of bear market, a secular bear market this time, rather one that goes down instead of just sideways?
Well, very frankly, as you indicated from what you read my material at the beginning of this interview, I think we're in one of those right now. I think this is a secular bear market that's going to last for a long period of time. It's going to be volatile. It has been volatile so far. I mean, look at the kind of moves. We have just seen moves down and up that have been singular moves in the history of the stock market. I mean, that decline that we had of approximately 60% in the S&P was the second largest decline in history on the S&P. The only one larger was the famous 29 to 32 crash. So we saw that, and then we saw a rally of over 50, almost 60% to the upside. Of course, that didn't retrace the complete decline that we had, but go back and try and find in market history a rally of 50 or 60% in a 6, 7, 8 month period, and you'll be hard pressed to do that. The only other time I believe that we've seen that was off the bottom in 1932 when we were up over, I think, 100% in just a few months. But aside from those two times compared to the 1930s, the market's never done what it has done in the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. So I think, though, that we are in a secular bear market that's going to last for a long period of time. One of the reasons I say that is that we've just gone through one of the great bull markets in history. I mean, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you measure it, you can start from 1974, you can start from 1982, 1987 after the crash, or 1990. But we really had a market that went fabulously well up into 2000. There's no arguing about that. Then we had a bear market, I guess one could argue, from 2000 to 2002, although there's something fascinating that I want to talk to you. In fact, let me break in right now and say this. And
okay.
I don't know how many technicians are aware of this, but I don't think there are any good technicians that are not aware of advanced decline lines.
Right.
And if you ask a technician about the advanced decline line, I'm willing to bet that there are very, very few of them that are aware of what happened to the advanced decline line in that time period from 2000 to 2002. I'm not going to put you in the spot and ask you what you think happened, but let me tell you that the daily advanced decline line of the New York Stock Exchange reached a bottom between the period of around October, November, December of the year 2000. Now, mind you, this is when the New York Stock Exchange Index in September of 2000 reached its all-time high and came down for almost the next 2 years into, of course, October of 2002, and then almost a double bottom on some indexes in March of 2003. But how many technicians know that the daily advanced decline line reached its low in that big market decline? It topped in 1998. In fact, I had written an article in Barron's magazine right around April of 98. It was within a couple of weeks of what was at that time a new high in the advanced decline line on the New York Stock Exchange. And for the next 3 or 4 years, actually the next couple of years from the 98 into 2000, that line came down pretty hard and bottomed in November, December of the year 2000. And that was an incredible configuration because those of us that are technicians have learned that we should really see the advanced decline line confirm any moves in the market in order to give them authenticity, especially if the market continues to go to new highs. The advanced decline line should be doing approximately the same thing. If it's going down while the market's going up, that's usually not a very good sign. And so we saw that happen in the year 2000, but it really worked in a way that I had never seen it work before, because we had a bottom, as I said, towards the end of 2000, and then we rallied up to a high in May of the year 2002. It wasn't a dramatic rally, not a straight-up rally, but the market did that, and then it pulled back again, coming to a bottom in October of 2002. But that October of 2002 bottom was comfortably above the bottom that was seen at the 2000 low. So it's one of the things that, as a technician, that we should be well aware of. And the other reason I bring the advanced decline line up now is that, lo and behold, Ed, this really has me in a quandary. The advanced decline ratio of the New York Stock Exchange, and let's quickly delineate a ratio from a cumulative advanced decline line. That in terms of the advanced decline line, today, the advanced decline ratio is within a hair's breadth of its all-time highs that were reached in July of 2007. Now, if you ask me to explain that to you and what it means, I'm hard-pressed to do that, although I think ultimately it's going to have bearish connotations. Right now, it just shows you that the underlying breadth of this market has been quite remarkable from the March bottom, and that's something that we should pay attention to and give it its due right now. And for the time being, I think it lends a bullish aspect to what's been going on in the market.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's wrap up by and that's a great segue into what I wanted to ask you about this last item. I quoted you in our opening. In order for the dramatic downside projection to around 400 to be invalidated, the S&P would need to get above 1100 before the end of this year. Well, we just got, what did we do yesterday? 1109, something like that. So is that invalidated, or do you need to see that on a weekly basis, or does your advanced decline commentary tell us that you've already changed your mind about bearishness?
Well, I'm very quickly bringing up a chart as you ask me that question, because that chart will tell the story. Actually, it is very close to being invalidated. I would say that right now, in fact, this week, we are getting back above the projection line that gave that projection. So if we get there and stay there with this move above 1100 over the next couple of weeks, and especially if we continue to move upward over the next month or so, then that projection will at least temporarily be invalidated, and perhaps invalidated for good, but it's not a complete invalidation yet.
Peter, it's been great having you with us today. Anything else you want to add before we conclude today?
No, nothing important except to say to people that this has been a very tricky market, and it will continue to be tricky. I think right now, very quickly in terms of the outlook, I think there's a pretty good chance this continues into next year. But then at the next market top, I would say to be ultra cautious, because I think that's the point where there's the possibility of seeing an even worse decline.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was Peter Eliades, and that wraps up today's MTA podcast. I'm Ed Carlson in Seattle. You can follow me at fatechnicaladvisor.blogspot.com or contact me at fatechnicaladvisor@comcast.net. Send us your comments and suggestions. Let's keep our stops tight, people. Good day.